And when you shift your frequency, you open up a new door essentially. And oftentimes that door is filled with new experiences, but also people with similar frequency. So when we're in the mud puddle, we're with people in the mud puddle. And the only way to get out of the mud puddle is shift your frequencies.
Welcome to Exploring the Mystical Side of Life with your host, Linda Lang.
Hi, this is Linda Lang from ThoughtChange.com. We are exploring the mystical side of life once again this week. If you enjoy our conversations, remember to subscribe, share with a friend. Today, I have JJ DiGeronimo with me. JJ is an author and the founder of Together We See. Welcome, JJ.
Hello, Linda. So thrilled to be with you.
I'm very excited for our conversation today. We're talking frequency and alignment. So, JJ, one of the things that a lot of people approach me about is how can I align with my life purpose? I know you've got a lot to say about this.
Well, this is something that I've struggled with for decades. And I would say that I was taught really early on that it was outside of me. And the more I learned about masculine and feminine energy that all of us holds, I feel like I was striving and driving to find, reach, achieve, get there, be, and do. And it wasn't until I sort of had my own life epiphany that I realized that there is definite benefits in all of that energy, but the wisdom, the knowing, the intuition, the connection with Mother Earth was something that I had to dive into to really understand more of who I was and the gifts that I came with. And that really started within. So I had to shift my striving and driving to my intuition, my knowing, my connection with self. And when I was able to make that shift, which took some time, I learned, it was shown that really where we are right now is our purpose. And when we move through that lesson or gain that knowledge, the next set of lessons appear. And so I had to shift from getting there to being in it. And I think initially it sounded kind of silly. And how could it be so simple? But when I dove into the stories that I was holding, the relationships I was in, the work I was aligned to, I realized there was nothing simple about it at all. That really life is perfectly orchestrated for us to gain the knowledge and wisdom for us to then evolve as a soul to the next level. And that could take an entire lifetime for one or two lessons that align us to our purpose.
Do you think that you have to know who you are? Like have a certain level of self-awareness to really plug into that alignment purpose?
I think you have to do some self-work because we come into the body as light and soul into the human body, which comes with the ego and the energy of the humanness. And we have to learn to shift to able to tap into that knowing and soul along with our ego. So our ego is not bad. It's just a protection mechanism. And so you have to be able to create the space, which I achieved through mindfulness training, which then actually allowed me to meditate. But you have to be able to create the space to tap into that inner wisdom.
Now, you talk about mindfulness as a way in. Are there any other methods that can help narrow your focus down so you can actually plug into that alignment?
Yeah, for me, mindfulness was super important because I was so much in my head all the time that I didn't know that there was any other way to live outside of just the thoughts in my head. And so I had to create space to recognize that the thoughts in my head are only a part of who I am. But some people do this through running. Some people do it through reading or walking or gardening. So I feel like whatever allows you to create space between your thoughts is a great place to start.
Let's talk about that alignment for a minute because I don't think it's just like a light switch where, poof, all of a sudden there's your alignment. I think it changes and grows and evolves just like you do.
Yes, and it's really why, I put together my third book, Seeking, because I wanted people to know that it's multifaceted. There's not a magic anything, not a magic pill, not a magic job, not a magic person, that you have to do the work. And the work is really diving into your thoughts, your frustration, your relationships, your relationship with your mother, how you view money. Do you struggle with perfectionism? Whatever your hangups are, whatever experiences you go through, they are perfectly orchestrated for you and hold lessons and insight into your life's work.
So let's take one of those as an example and dive into it so people understand the picking apart, because it's not about finding blame or something that you have to fix, right? It's really about a knowingness of who you are.
Yeah, it really is. And it comes to you in various ways. So I always talk about glimpses of your life's work, glimpses. And so, my life's work is a lot about raising the feminine and masculine energy to a more equal level on the planet. And I was born into a family where my mother came from an abusive family and then moved right in with my father, who had an energy or control over her that she's still working to break through in many ways. And being born into that family of watching a woman feel trapped in her circumstances, I believe was perfect conditioning and training for the work that I do now. This mother of mine, which I love very dearly and just took her to Omega Institute a few weeks ago to do some soul survival. She was partnered up with randomly a woman that was in an arranged marriage. And I think it was such an epiphany for her because I feel like she had lived a lot of her life as though she was in arranged marriage, but she wasn't. And then years later, she's in her 70s and was paired up with someone in arranged marriage. And they had a long conversation about it, what it's like. And she walked away, I think even more enlightened. So it's just these situations that happen that I get to be part of, which was pretty exciting. But to kind of further that knowing is if you go back into your life, there are milestones in your life that prepare you for the moment that you're in now. And I feel like you have to do a little bit of investigation, a little Sherlock Holmes into your life's milestones, intersection points, maybe guides that have helped you along the way. And if you start to kind of go through that data, which I've done over a decade now, it's amazing how you are brought to the point that you're at right now. And if you're sitting at a point being like, I don't believe you, or this is ridiculous, or I hate my life, the most beautiful thing of all that is you get to shift anytime you're ready.
So if someone is kind of going through one of these states of confusion or wanting to transform their life, how can they make that shift on the inside? Because it's often the thinking of the circumstances that's creating the emotional confusion and actually puts blinders on to the other possibilities available, right?
Yes, it really is. And I've been there myself. I've watched other people be there, and I feel like it comes really down to frequency. I love the word frequency. I wholeheartedly believe in frequency, that you reside at a certain frequency. And if you think of frequency like FM radio, frequency modulation, are you down at 87.5? Or are you way up at 102.7? Or do you fall somewhere in between? Your frequency is completely controlled, managed, monitored, and shifted by you. And I really come down to three things. It really, for me, comes down to three things.
Will you share them?
The first one is, how do you talk to yourself? Now, I didn't realize how I talked to myself until I studied mindfulness, because without mindfulness, for me, I wasn't really fully an observer of my thoughts. I was my thought. And mindfulness gave me the space to be an observer of my thoughts, meaning I was in the present moment, listening or watching how I was talking to myself. And I have to say, it was not very friendly. It was not positive. It wasn't supportive. I beat the crap out of myself most of the time. And so knowing that I do that on a regular basis, and most of us do, that you just have to kind of monitor what is the conversation you're having with yourself and how do you compartmentalize that or allow that to kind of be a strand of your thoughts, but not all of your thoughts. And generally, how we talk to ourselves is how we talk to others. So if you, even if you don't say it, you could just be talking about it in your head. So the first step for me is really compartmentalizing my negative thoughts, my self doubts, my conversations maybe about other people. So I kind of allow myself to have that space at times, but I also recognize that it is only a portion of who I am and is not what is possible or who can evolve through kind of the muckety muck. Because if you're in a mud puddle, you're generally in a mud puddle with other people. And so all of them like, oh, can you believe what happened today? This, and I can't stand this, and this keeps happening to me. And so to shift that, the easiest way to shift your thoughts is to have a focus on gratitude. And as goofy as that sounds, and probably you've heard it before, finding 10 things you can be grateful for this moment. And there are 10, probably 110 things. But if that is like, I have a lunch, I had shoes that don't have holes in them, I slept in a bed, I found 10 cents on the floor, like whatever it is the ability of getting out of that negative conversation within your head. And I should probably have made that the third one because the other two are a heck of a lot easier than the first one.
That first one is a doozy, for sure, for sure. A lot of people can really get stuck in that first one and then start judging themselves or feeling like they're broken.
Mhm.
What would you say to them?
As hard as it may sound, I would say that there are no accidents and that your life is perfectly orchestrated for you. And that when you decide to come down to be a human, you get together with your soul team. These are people that you've interacted with already, and you are already agreeing to the lesson you're going to work through. And I often say to my mother, like, do you want to do this again? Because if you don't, you need to make a shift. You need to find your independence. You don't have to necessarily leave him, but you have to find independence within the relationship. That means getting out and doing things or aligning to things that are important to you. Don't take the easiest path of just being available to that experience. Like there are other experiences for you.
And that doing pattern over and over again doesn't necessarily mean this lifetime only.
That's the truth. But I definitely would like to hit some things head on in this lifetime so I can minimize this lesson in the next lifetime.
Exactly, exactly. And what about the other two?
So the other two for me is really about what I pay attention to is number two. What do I pay attention to? So what am I reading? What am I attending? What am I watching? What am I listening to? My phone for me is an education device, and I listen to podcasts and YouTubes like yours and other conversations that are about enlightening my soul, energizing myself, finding ways. One of my favorite meditations is Steve Noble's meditations, which is all about lifting up your energy. And so if you're struggling with number one, about how you talk to yourself, how you interact with yourself, what you think about, you can always go to number two of what you pay attention to.
And number three.
Number three is how you take care of yourself, which is a hard thing because oftentimes we're working hard. We have a lot of people that are connected to us and that we're supporting. And a lot of people are really focused on, they'll say, oh, well, I have to get a massage or I have to go on a trip, which are all wonderful things to do. But sometimes we don't have the means to do that. Sometimes we don't have the time off to do that or the ability. So sometimes it's just about what you eat, right? It's about your nervous system. It's about slowing yourself down enough. And this is how I use meditations as I really give myself 5-10 minutes a day to just meditate so I can remember that I've chosen to be in this body, that I am part of this experience, and that my life's work is exactly where I am in this moment. And I think if you can combine those three steps, you will shift your frequency.
And why would you want to shift your frequency?
One of my favorite questions. Because you want to shift your experience, you want to move or elevate to the next experience. And when you shift your frequency, you open up a new door, essentially. And oftentimes that door is filled with new experiences, but also people with similar frequency. So when we're in the mud puddle, we're with people in the mud puddle. And the only way to get out of the mud puddle is shift your frequency. So if you're listening and you've had enough, or you're done with this lesson, or you're like, I am ready, really focusing on those 3 steps can help you shift your frequency, because when you shift on the inside, as you know, Linda, you shift your outside.
Exactly. And then things that aren't in alignment fall away and new things come.
They do. And how many times have we been in our life where someone says, you're different. Something's changed. What doing? What's going on with you? If you hear those things, you are on the right path. Like, you are making it happen, because people will start to notice. And in 2010, I was in the mud puddle, and I didn't really realize it. And like, I remember being in the office being so frustrated because every time I went to the coffee machine, it was like empty. I'm like, who does not make more coffee? Like, what the heck is wrong with everybody? And I felt like that's how I went through my whole day. And I had a little guide, someone who comes along in your life, which kind of shifts you right when you might be going left. And they gave me a couple books, and they gave me like a course to listen to. And it helped me start the beginning of getting out of that cycle. And it's amazing, because shortly after I sort of really got into these lessons, the coffee pot was often filled when I went to it.
I love it because it's another example of how life is working for you. Beautiful. So, JJ, let's go back to aligning with the purpose for a moment, because I think that's another thing that is a benefit of shifting your frequency, is that your alignment is going to shift as well. Your purpose in the moment is going to shift. Let's talk a bit about that.
Well, it's interesting, because sometimes when things come to you, or sometimes when things don't happen for you, it's easy to get in that spiral of like, back when I was working on the next book, I had a really hard time getting somebody to pick up the book. And I was feeling so down about it. I was like, well, the book must just not be meant to be in the world. And so I put the book on the shelf, because I had gotten 4 no's right away. And then I got another 2 no's from different publishing houses. And it's the 3rd book. So at this point, I should not have a hard time getting my book published. But it's funny, because I sat on the shelf for about 6 months, and then I started getting questions about the book, like specific chapters, like, hey, JJ, I really struggle with perfectionism. What do you do for that? Which was an entire chapter in the book. I really saw those as signs that I should publish the book, because when people start asking me for things that I have on my heart or in my mind, but don't really have on my calendar, I see that as God's way of calling to me, saying, this is now the time. I would say that I wouldn't been aware of that had I not really done the mindfulness training. If I wasn't in the present moment, watching and seeing what was coming to me, I would have blown through those signs. And so I think a lot of us are like, well, we want to be aligned to our purpose, but we're going to be planning for the future or reflecting on the past. And it really takes a lot of training to be in the present moment. But when you can teach yourself to be in the present moment, which I use John Kabat-Zinn's training, when you teach yourself to be in the present moment, all the signs and lessons and whispers come. They're available to you, but you have to be in the present moment to receive them. And when you get those signs, lessons, and whispers, it's a lot easier to align with your purpose.
Maybe one of the tricks, JJ, is when we get those experiences that seem like obstacles. Like, how do we know if it's an obstacle, or if it's a timing thing, or if it's just not the path you are supposed to go? Sometimes people who do a lot of self-reflection will interpret the outside experiences as something they need to fix inside themselves. How do you know what's an obstacle that needs to be looked at, or something that just is not meant for you, or it's not the right time for you?
Great question. Well, I would say that when I first tried to get my book picked up by a publisher, it wasn't the right time. I hadn't done enough work yet. And so putting it on the shelf 6 months, was great because it gave me a totally different perspective. I would say I'm definitely persistent when I feel passionate about something and I, collect my no's. So if I get one no or two no's, if I get 10 no's, that's obviously a great sign. But just one no doesn't do it for me. Like one no is just like, not this door. It's not now. It's just not this door. And I do so many things to kind of double check. Like if I'm putting something together, I have a lot of retreats. And if I'm putting a retreat together, I usually wait until people ask, like my whispers come through other people. So they ask me, are you having a retreat? Or I'm going to be in town this day on this weekend. Are you going to do it this weekend? Like if the day comes to me 3 times, then I'm like, okay, well, this is the day. But I still take it out on my patio. So I work in conjunction with Mother Nature, as we all do. But I go out there and I'll share with Mother Nature. Like I'll ask them if this is meant to be. So like, for example, I'll go out on the patio and say, I'm planning a retreat for October 16th with these practitioners. And I'll just sit there and wait. And if nothing happens, then I'm like, I got to go back to the drawing board or I've got to go tweak something. But if it's the right combination, the wind will pick up, the birds will chirp louder. Sometimes I get a crazy thing. A butterfly shows up on my bush right where my step is. I get validation. And so I'm a big believer in using and working with Mother Nature to ask, is this the right thing for me? My other trick too is like, I'm constantly asking myself, what is the lesson? Okay, so I was just overseas for work and I got in a horrible accident, and I was like, okay, what is the lesson? What is the lesson? It just so happened that I fell off this thing and hit my right hip, which I've had a lot of energy sitting in for a long time. It's probably related to my husband and my father. I've been trying to move it out for a long time, and I just sort of whipped off this Segway and I ended up on the curb, and it was the exactly same right hip. I probably should have broke my hip. But for me, I think I fell so hard on my hip to help me get that energy out of my hip. So when people are like, I'm taking you to the hospital, I'm like, no, I am good. I'm going to walk this off. Luckily, I didn't break anything, but I look at life very differently. I'm like, what is the lesson? What is the lesson? What is the lesson? And to believe that the universe is here to help you.
So it is all about you, but it's not necessarily something wrong with you.
No, definitely not something wrong with you. You picked this. You picked this. It's hard to wrap your mind around, but like you are part of your human experience. You were part of it before you got in this human body, and you'll be part of it when you leave this human body. And believing that you are in this human body based on a mission that you have chosen.
All right. Thank you, JJ. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I just feel fortunate to be with you right now. I think this is a perfect example of frequency. I would have never been invited to join you 3 years ago or 5 years ago. I've done a lot of work on raising my frequency to match the frequency of you and your guests and the energy of this exchange. And I think if anyone who's listening to this, if you don't feel like your energy is there, if you have access to this conversation, you have all the potential to be where we are and beyond.
Beautiful. And where can we send listeners who want to learn more?
I think the easiest place is Together We Seek. I have community of energy practitioners and myself that I'm constantly educating people on how to get rid of the darkness, how to work through your stories, how to find ways to lighten your load and raise your frequency. And you can find me on most platforms under JJ DiGeronimo.
Perfect. Perfect. Tell us a little bit about your book, JJ.
Well, if what we talked about interests you and you're really looking to do your own work, Seeking is a great way to get started. Seeking has 74 key lessons to raise your energy, sidestep your self-doubt, and align with your life's work. I couldn't possibly share all the nuggets in the book, but I would say that it is divinely prepared with me and my angels to create a way for every human to work through their stories, to align with mindfulness, and to really understand how to step more into your life's work with a very action-based book. So if that's where you're at, it's a great tool to really get to that next level.
Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Linda.
And thank you for listening to this week's edition of Exploring the Mystical Side of Life. You will find all of our conversations on YouTube, on your favorite podcast platform. Come visit me at thoughtchange.com to explore the world of energy. Check out my program, Alchemy from the Inside Out, and we will see you again next time.